Great. So we've got jQuery installed. Let's find out what we can do with it. I'm going to start by looking at how we can do all the things that we did before in JavaScript, but using jQuery. And we'll look at why jQuery might be advantageous in some ways. So first off, a little challenge for you. Can you create 2 red squares and 1 green circle? I'll give you a couple of moments. Did you manage it? Hopefully you did something like this. Created some style tags and a couple of divs. So I'll have, I said 1 green circle, I think. So we'll have an ID for our circle because there's only one of them. For our squares, we've got 2 of them. So I'm going to use class instead of ID. Okay. And then the styles for those will look something like this. So for our circle, we'll have a width of 200, a height of 200, a background color of green, and a border radius of 100 pixels. That should do our green circle. For our square, remember it's a class, so we use the dot rather than the hash. And we'll make them the same size. But they're going to have a background color of red and no border radius because we want them to be squares. Let's save that. Take a look. We've still got our JavaScript pop up there. Great. Okay, so I've got my circle and 2 squares. The squares have kind of merged into each other a little bit, so I'm going to give them a margin top of 10 pixels, just so it spreads out a little bit. There we go. Great. Okay, so we've got our circle and 2 squares. So all we're going to do in this video is use jQuery to set up a little script so that when we click on them, they pop up that they've been clicked on. So exactly the same as what we did with JavaScript. Let's see how we do it. We don't need this jQuery install script anymore, so I'm going to get rid of that. So the way we actually select an element in jQuery is a little bit different to how we do it in JavaScript. We use the string symbol, and that's the symbol that we use pretty much every time we use some jQuery. So it starts off a jQuery function. And in this case, we're going to select the ID of circle. So I'll write it out and then explain how we do that. So very simply, we've got the string symbol to invoke jQuery, and then we've got brackets, and inside those brackets, we've got a selector. So this selector selects the ID, because we're using the hash symbol, so it's an ID of circle. I'll show you a couple of different types of selectors in a minute, but for the moment we'll just carry on with this one. So we're selecting, using jQuery, the circle ID. So essentially we're selecting this green circle div up there. And we want to invoke the click function. So we use circle.click, and we want it to be a function, or the click is a function. And then the actual function that we want to run, we put inside those curly brackets. So it's a similar syntax to what we used with JavaScript. And in fact, it's worth saying a few times that jQuery is just JavaScript. It's just a layer on top of JavaScript to make it a little bit more usable. So we've got select our circle ID, and then when we click on it, we want to run this particular function, and then the function we're going to put inside those curly brackets. And we want a semicolon there to end our command. So we're going to have a very simple function. alert, circle clicked. Okay, let's see if that worked. Brilliant. So we've recreated the document.getElementById, which we used in the JavaScript chapter, and the onClick function. Okay, I said I'd point out a few ways in which we can select things differently. So let's have a quick look at what would happen if we wanted to select the squares instead of the circles. Well, what we would do, you might be able to guess. Instead of the hash symbol, we use the dot because we're selecting by a class rather than an ID, and then we just give the name of the class. So square. See what happens there. So now if I click on the circle, nothing happens. But if I click on the squares, it still says, it says circle clicked, doesn't it? Let's change it to square clicked. There we go. And if I click on that one too. So that's one way in which jQuery is a little bit more easy or a little bit more powerful than JavaScript, because we can very easily select multiple elements and do something with them at the same time. In JavaScript you can do that, but it's a little bit more complicated. Okay, the last thing for this chapter is we don't have to actually use IDs or classes at all. We can use element names, for example. So maybe I want to select all of the divs. Then this time I don't use a hash or a dot because I'm not using an element or ID to select my elements. I'm actually using the element type. So I can just put div in there, and then let's change the alert to div clicked. And now when I click on the circle, I get div clicked, and the same thing with both of those squares. So each of the divs is selected. If I click somewhere else, there's no div there, so nothing is alerted. So this is a really powerful use of jQuery just at the very beginning. We can use it to select IDs, classes, or any element type just there. So I suggest you try a few things out, maybe try and put a few links in there and see what happens when you apply the click function to those.